the second day of the Genome Application Symposium. Today we will start with a session on stakeholder engagement and communication, good practices and challenges, and this will be chaired by Luísa and Chiara Bortoluzzi. And so the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, José. So I will share my screen. Hopefully you see it without any problem. Yeah,
I will see it.
It's loading. Okay. So yeah, as José just said, me and Chiara will be the moderators of this session, but we invited other people to give short talks. So Ivana, Jean-Baptiste, José, and will be joining us, and they will bring perspectives from different countries. So here in the map, you will see the different institutions that we are coming from. And yeah, this will be short talks just to give us some examples of what they are doing in terms of stakeholder engagement and communication. And hopefully after that, we will have a bit longer discussion. So yeah, you can write down your questions, everyone in the audience, about their work and general topics if you want to bring up in this world of stakeholder engagement and communication. So just a brief introduction to this section. I was here the whole day yesterday and I saw this topic coming up multiple times. So I took here one of the results of the Mentimeter of the second session yesterday, just one example of a moment when communication and stakeholder engagement came up as an important topic. So I think from this, you see the number of times people were saying that this is important if we want to make genomic tools useful, more applied or immediately applied to conservation problems or other society problems in general. So not only the researchers know this, but more and more the funding bodies also give this emphasis and recognize the importance. So here is one example that we are familiar with because it's the Horizon Europe that funds BGE. And as you see, communication, dissemination, and exploitation practices are legal obligations under these grant agreements. So they are now mandatory in any project. And I think keeping this in mind, these three pillars of and how different they are. So this is really informative. And I think it can really help for any scale of project. So not only a huge project like BG that we will have an example here today, but also in a smaller scale. If you know who you are talking to, what are our goals with these different activities, it's easier to make a plan and maybe really leave an impact, leave a legacy. That is, I think, what everyone wants with an applied project, right? To make a change. And with that, I think if Chiara wants to add anything to this short introduction, yeah, you can say, or I pass the word to Ivana.
We can pass the words to Ivana directly. Thanks, Luísa.
Thank you very much for the introduction and for the invitation. And good morning, everybody. I'm trying to share my presentation. So it's me again, and some challenges, again, similar as it was yesterday, but different kind of challenges. For the ones that maybe didn't manage to join us yesterday morning, I'm Ivana from Croatia. I work at the University of Zagreb. And since me and, of course, my group are quite deeply involved in conservational projects, we are doing a lot with stakeholders. So today I will try to present some of, again, my experiences and some lessons that I learned during these projects. This pathway, these stakeholders engagement processes that are now mandatory but are beneficial even for conservational projects in which they are not legally mandatory, can be difficult sometimes. I must say that now I'm really enjoying that's the part of the work that I'm really enjoying. But now we do have so nice and so friendly relationship with most of our stakeholders, but the pathway to come to this was not always easy. But we did have organized quite a lot of events, workshops, all kind of stakeholders engagement. So I will share some of my experiences with you. So to start with, I will just briefly touch upon the first step in all kinds of stakeholders engagement processes. So first, what you have to do, of course, is identify what stakeholders are important to include in the project you are conducting. So stakeholders identification is the first step. Sometimes even project already says who you have to invite and who you have to include. And sometimes, like for example, in RBGE case studies, you have more flexibility. So you can choose which stakeholders group you want to include and how in order to achieve your objective. So that actually can depend on the projects. Anyway, here are a couple of groups of stakeholders that are mostly included in conservation projects. So some policymakers, either at national or local levels, or even for some projects at international levels, of course. Then for us, these are the most important stakeholders. So public institutions that are managing protected areas and species in Croatia. So real conservation practitioners, expert institutions, experts from other groups, universities, maybe international groups, etc. Then NGOs that are involved in certain aspects of nature conservation. And of course, some other societies, even often local public, etc. When I say societies, for us, since we are dealing mostly with freshwater fish and freshwater environments, these societies are, for example, fishery societies, sometimes aquaculture sector. Again, it depends on the objectives of the project. So in our projects, we did have sometimes, we worked with only a couple of stakeholders, but we have hundreds of them in some projects. So the number, it really only depends on the objectives. The next step, when you identified stakeholders, is to decide and analyze how you will include them, how deeply you will include them, and on what level. And we often use this approach that I included here in this slide. There are other approaches, but this one is quite efficient. So you have to define which stakeholders it is maybe only enough to inform, which one you want to educate and maybe get them to apply the same activities maybe elsewhere or something like that. Then maybe you will have stakeholders that you will ask for information, up to the ones that you will be working closely with, and design and finally implement conservational measures together with. So for us, most often these are these conservation practitioners. And finally, once you have all these steps settled, you decide upon the methodology you will use for certain stakeholders group. And here you really, you can only be constrained by your creativity, everything you can think of and think it can be useful for certain stakeholders group you can include, particularly because, as Luísa already mentioned, now these stakeholders involvement process are part of almost every project. So stakeholders are often they often have to attend many workshops. They're often involved in many of these processes. So if you can come up with something new, that's always beneficial. Of course, what methodology will you use also depends on how well you know your stakeholders. If you have already worked with them, then you know what is maybe the best way to approach them and how maybe you will get the best results. So this is just the first step. And now I would like to share with you once you have identified your stakeholders, when you are working with them, some lessons that, these are not lessons from any textbook, these are lessons that I have learned from my experience, and now I'm really always trying to apply. So lesson number 1 is never complain, always explain. So this is me explaining always. And then you do get some nice comments. These are just a couple of pearls from my collection. And well, previously I was explaining, but also complaining. And sometimes I even let myself get into some quarrels on something like that. And that's how I learned this lesson. Now I don't do that. So when somebody said me, no, these are not invasive species, my grandfather saw them there. Even though I would like to say, yes, he probably introduced them there, I don't say that. I explain again and again why these invasive species are problematic, etc. I put here on the slide a couple of pearls, but I really have to mention that in our work, the most of the comments and the most of the answers and are positive. And it's really, really great work. So we are coming to the lesson number 2. You have to, the conservation practitioners often ask really to explain what they have to do. Not so much how we came to that, but what they have to do. But it's even more if you show them and if you do that with them, if you spend time with them in the field and do activities together. That's really the best way. The lesson number 3, I've been attending some workshops where organizers, so trainers or teachers, or I don't know how to call them, have been talking with their audience like with kids. And that's not a good way. I've been giving workshops even for quite small kids, and I know they can understand, for example, invasive species, what that is, and come up with some really great solutions. And particularly when you're talking with adults, please just use proper terminology, explain methodology. That doesn't matter. Mostly, my experience is that they love to learn. So it's easy to pass some knowledge to them. On the other hand, and we come to the lesson number 4, it's so many things can be learned from them. They know about the species they're managing, about habitats. So learning from them, letting them teach you can really help making conservational activities more efficient. And the final lesson, my final lesson, is be patient. Sometimes I will show just one example, which turned out to be a great success, but it took us like 4 or 5 years to start it. There are sometimes cases when after an event with stakeholders, you think it was terrible and it didn't have any success, but a couple of months later something happens or somebody calls you and you see that it was worth. So every single effort, every single work with stakeholders finally pays off. If you have, these are my lessons, as I say. If you have some more from your experience, I would love to hear them. Please include them in the chat so we will read them. And now I will just shortly touch upon the case study that we have under BGE project. I have been talking about this small fish yesterday, so we are dealing with the evolution and taxonomy of Knipovicea and related species, but the results we will try to implement in practice as soon as possible. And that is why this work with stakeholders is very important. So we have defined 2 specific objectives of the stakeholders engagement process inside our case studies. One is really to make the conservation of this species group more efficient based on the genomic results obtained. But the second one is also to share knowledge, how genomics can maybe for other groups and other places be useful for real conservation of species. So we have identified stakeholders. Here are the principal ones. And we have identified level of inclusion for all of them, and the methodology that will be used. For now, we have organized only 2 workshops. We will do more when we will have some results. They were really nice. One was focusing the scientific community at the Faculty of Science, and the second one was organized inside one protected area where one of those species lives. And I will end up with just some important conclusions that we reach. We notice lack of knowledge on the applicability of genomic investigations, both inside scientific community and in conservation practitioners group. Scientists were very interested in maybe some workshops, and they would like to apply this methodology in their investigations, particularly young scientists. They were really anxious to have some workshops. On the other hand, but I was expecting this, conservation practitioners would like to have these results and to implement them, but they would like us to design measures based on the results, not only to provide them with our results, but to tell them how to put that in practice and how to make their work better and easier in this way. So I hope I didn't speak too long, because we have more speeches. I will finish with this, and thank you very much for the attention.
So next one, we pass the word to Jean-Baptiste. Thank you, Ivana. Really nice presentation.
Good morning. Let me share my screen. Okay, you can see my PowerPoint. Yeah. Okay, so good morning, everyone. So I'm I'm Jean-Baptiste. I'm working at CIMAR in Porto, in Portugal, and I am here to briefly present the interaction I had to date with different stakeholders and the interaction I will have in the framework of the BGE case study, Red Core 2, which is dedicated to the conservation genomic of the Mediterranean red coral, Corallium rubrum, that you can see on this picture. I will not go too much into detail into the case study, but just to mention, sorry, that this species is fished since ancient time. This is a Mediterranean species which is fished since ancient time for its use in jewelry, as you can see with this craft here. There is a huge decrease of the annual yield of red coral. You can see this on this graph. So this is the first anthropogenic pressure impacted the species. And you have another one, which is extreme climatic event, marine heat waves, which induce mass mortality event along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea until depths of 40 meters, and since a couple of decades now, since the end of the 20th century. So the red coral is deeply impacted by those mass mortality events with necrosis and huge mortality rates in some populations. So this is in this context that I am implementing my project. And I will now present, so I define 2 kinds of interaction with stakeholders. Ones that are directly linked to the project, and other ones that are more, let's say, opportunistic and directed towards the general public. So first, the interaction with stakeholders linked to the project. The project is divided in 2 main objectives. The first one is to set up the species evolutionary stage and to contribute to fishery stock assessment. As I mentioned, the red coral is a over-harvested species. And I received the support for this objective of the General Fisheries Commission for the Mediterranean Sea. So this is an organization from the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. And this organization, this commission, is currently leading a research program on the red coral to estimate the fishery stock and to eventually implement new rules for the fishing. So through this commission, I have the possibility to interact with a lot of different stakeholders, from the GFCM official to different national administration from almost all the Mediterranean countries. As I mentioned, there is a research program on the red coral, so I am directly in contact with many scientists and fishery experts on red coral. Interestingly, there are also representatives of the jewelry industry and fishermen. So this is always nice to be able to share the different point of view on the conservation or on the biology of the species. There are also representatives of different NGO and other relevant regional stakeholders. So until now, I mostly interact with them through communication and dissemination. I present the project during a workshop last April, in the 5th and 4th of April 2024. And basically, our interaction is made in two steps. So first, as mentioned, I received the support of the GFCM. So not only support through a letter of when I applied for the BG project, but we are also in a strong partnership. They are sharing some sample and DNA extraction for the first objective of the Red Core 2 project. And in the meantime, they will benefit from the reference genome we are currently publishing, because in their project there is a small population genetic part based on rat sequencing, so they will be able to map their rat on the reference genome. And I also engaged to share the conclusion of the first objective of the Red Core project during their meetings. So this is this interaction that make my engagement with this with the General Fishery Commission for the Mediterranean. Then you have the second objective of the Red Core project, which is to develop a case study on population genomics for marine protected area management. And this part of the project is focused on two marine protected areas from the Catalan coast, the Parc Natural del Montgrí, IS Medes, Baix-Ter, and the Parc Natural de Cap de Creus. And so here my interaction or our interaction with the stakeholder is communication and dissemination. So we are engaged to share the results of the mostly based on the connectivity of the different red coral population in the two marine protected areas. And we were recently in a field trip for sampling. So this include interaction for everything related to the logistic of the sampling, so permits, etc., etc. So this was the first kind of interaction, the interaction directly related to the project. And then I also experienced in the last months some interaction. It was quite new for me with the general audience. And this is due to the work of Eunice Souza, which is the head of the Image Communication and Outreach Office at CIMAR. And she did a great work because she had a lot of contact with different media. And I received the project, the Red Core 2 project, received a big cover in different media, such as a newspaper, national newspaper in Portugal. I also have to do TV interviews, there is a publication on the website of the Porto University. And in addition to the TV interview, I also had to do some interview on the radio, national radio, and even Radio France International. So yeah, it was quite dense, let's say. So you have here some example of the coverage of the project, and I would like to finish with a small question I have after all this interaction with journalists, and in particular following one of the small interview I had is to know whether all the interaction we can have with media are good interaction. And in particular, I want to highlight this title that was by a reportage on a small reportage covering the project on the TV. And the title is Portugal will save Mediterranean corals. And I say that I feel like a bit ashamed by this title, and I would really like to hear about what you think about this, is whether we should always go and talk about our project and whatever the result, because we don't have the hand on the final interview on what they will put on the media or not. And so yeah, I would like to hear you about this. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Really interesting, especially this last question. We can discuss it, definitely. Okay, so now Will and Jose will talk a bit more about BG.
Yeah, let me just share my screen. I believe that you must be seeing that. You see that, right? In like in proper size, probably. Because I can't see it for now. Oh yeah, now I see it. Yeah, so, now it would be nice actually if we go to the, there you go, number one. So yeah, that's an interesting question actually, Jean-Baptiste. You know, I mean, as a journalist myself, you know, I can say that, well, normally you need to sell newspapers, right? And you have to get audience for your shows and etc. If there is something that I have learned in the years that I've been working on this, is that communication about these kinds of projects is basically an exercise in managing expectations, right? Because we all promise a lot, obviously, you know, we have to, right? We get the funding and we have the aim, obviously, of getting a lot of things. You will see what the goals of BGE are, and you will say, well, I mean, these guys are pointing to a lot of things, right? The thing is that, yeah, sometimes you get carried away and you say, wow, you know, this is so interesting, because of the actual fascination that a journalist can feel about something. He can actually go and say, yeah, these people are going to save the corals in the Mediterranean, right? So yeah, as a journalist, I will, you know, play devil's advocate a little bit on this, you know, and say, okay, you know, you have to cut some slack to the guys, right? So, because they get all carried out easily. Okay, so the case of BGE is, I would say, quite different from the ones that Jean-Baptiste and Ivana has presented, because this is a large project, obviously. And because it is large and it is European-wide and everything, we all don't get that level of capillarity, let's say. We don't get that proximity. Actually, we rely on case studies, and we rely on the national level, on the local level, to get that proximity with the stakeholders, right? That being said, BG is a large project, but it's not just a large project. It's a large project that has a number of peculiarities, a number of particularities that I would like to go through with it. I'm not really sure exactly how much of the project you know, the audience know of this meeting, so I will go very, very fast also because we don't have a lot of time. So anyway, BG's mission, if you read that, you will see accelerate the use of genomics, genomic science to enhance understanding. That's a very important word. Biodiversity, monitor, that's also a very important word, biodiversity, and guide interventions, that's also a very important one. So in a way, what we're trying to do is that we want to make sure that biodiversity genomics has the role, plays the role that it can play and that it deserves to play, right? So this big acceleration of genomics, biodiversity genomics, for conservation and restoration of nature, can be translated into many goals. We have basically in BGE translated into three main ones, which have to do with capacity enhancement, production of data, and application of data as well. We don't have the time to get too much into detail, obviously. We have a website in which you can actually consult all these things, but it's important to know that the size of BGE is pretty big, actually. What's the BGE's approach to this? We basically work, the main aim, let's say, of the project in this case, in order to get all that acceleration that I mentioned before, is that we're trying to bring together these two big communities, ERGA on the one hand and IVOL Europe, It would be reasonable to say that by the end of the project, we need these two, especially IVOL Europe, because it's less mature, to be consolidated, right? In fact, we have, within the project, we have a work package for package 12, I believe it is, in which we try to actually make these two converge, Of course, there are different strands, they all have their particularities, but we try to find these points of, contact points, where we can actually work together at some point. So that's also very important because it's very characteristic of BGE to have in mind. And then, as I said before, BGE is a big one. And it's not only big one because it brings together 33 partners, I believe they are, across 23 countries. It's a large one, it's a large European project. But also in terms of content-wise, it's also large. Because the project stretches all the way from sampling to application that involves sampling and sequencing and generating the data and then application too. So it's a large project. These three things, let me see, because I have to hide you guys so I can actually see the text. There you go. These three main characteristics of BGE mean a number of challenges, right? One of them is that, okay, we said before, we need to give BGE or genomics, biodiversity genomics in this case, the role it deserves. So there is a certain amount of advocacy that we need to do. We want to make the case for the relevance of what biodiversity genomics can provide, can contribute to science, and make it clear for our stakeholders, of which we'll probably talk about much more in detail later on. Then we said we have to bring these two communities together, but we have to do a balancing act here. We have to communicate barcoding, we have to communicate genome sequencing. I haven't said that, but you probably know by now that ERGA focuses on genome sequencing, full genome sequencing. IVOL, in this case, IVOL Europe focuses more on barcoding. We have to balance that, We'll talk about this common voice that we will try to come up with in BGE for both of them, so they speak like one, let's say. We have an impact in scientific terms, because the project aims to create new reference libraries, barcodes, genomes, etc. But there is also a systemic one that has to do with what I said before, increasing capacity, increasing production, So there's also a challenge in terms of communication. You have to communicate a lot of things, a lot of different things to a large target audience, BGE is not only about scientists or not even the genomics community. It is about, first of all, of the BGE community. We're 33. We really need for everybody to be on the same page. So there's a lot of communication there. There's a lot of engagement in there. Actually, the first half of the project, I would say, is entirely, if not entirely, mostly for engaging the actual community, But there is also obviously the genomics community at large, the scientific community at large, and of course, all that has relationship with policy, the policy-related stakeholders, because as I said before, there's an advocacy component to the project. We need to make the case for biodiversity genomics. That entails obviously addressing them. As I said, BGE is an EU-wide project. So we take the EU higher vision, let's say, and then we rely on local, on national initiatives to actually do the actual work. We gear them up, we tool them up, so they are able to do things. Final thing, legacy. We need to maintain the visibility of BGE beyond the limits of the project. So I have talked about the problems, the challenges, and Will will probably talk about hopefully we'll talk about some solutions. So Will, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Jump on to the next slide. A quick one, when Jose said bring together, what we really mean in BGE is we're not wanting to create a monster and hybridize genomics and barcoding. We want to align those streams of science, just to make that clear. So in terms of communication, we've identified a number of key messages and formats for delivering messages that cover both the scientific and systemic aspects of biodiversity genomics. And with these, the benefit of having these templates and messages is that it's easy to adapt them to different target audiences and different languages. So for something as big as BGE, it really makes stuff a lot more manageable in communications. And the other important thing about setting out the key messages first in terms of templates that we adapt is we avoid the problem of confused or mixed messaging, which maybe further down the line could result in unfortunate titles, for example. Of course, at the final level, we still acknowledge that barcoding and genome sequencing operate different levels within the biodiversity genomics space. To disseminate the breadth of results across BGE, we have a communication team consisting of communications experts and people with backgrounds in science. So it'd be José and myself, for example. And what this helps us with in the big BGE project is that it's quicker for us to translate science into easily accessible summaries because we can do a lot of that independently. And so we lose time having to continually chase busy scientists to get feedback to hone the message. In that case, we are a special example where we can at least get feedback and we interact with the scientists, so we're less likely to make up a horrendous title and post it online without anybody having checked it. So that was a big advantage, having a mix of people in the team. To do this dissemination, obviously, we have a number of tools and channels, but the main one is the website and our section on that called the Knowledge Platform. And having a dedicated website with full control, it provides us with a single focal point for the project and more chance of broadcasting that single genomics voice at the very highest levels for the alignment bit, as well as providing overall project reviews. It's important that as the number of results is beginning to increase, ideally you would like people, say, from barcoding to come along and learn something about genome sequencing they wouldn't have done. So by having that single knowledge platform, we can hopefully increase cross-fertilization between the subjects, which was one of our main goals. So while the website is the focal point, and I'm rushing a bit because I realize it's the focal point, it's largely a conduit for pointing visitors to results that have been archived on other sites, as you guys well know, ENA, protocols.io, GitHub, or Bold for barcoding people, or Unite. And to ensure exploitation, most of which happens after the project's ended, we need these other long-lasting legacy sites to provide a home for the BGE projects, BGE outputs after the project ends. And so that they take care of that, which is great. One of the challenges we face is within our knowledge platform, as the results grow, we're going to have to create more summary documents that coalesce everything together, then point people out so that they can navigate the breadth of BGE. Where do we find a home for those sorts of documents? Well, we hope to take advantage of what we call the amplifier websites. So this will be Erga and Eyeball Europe that could amplify those generic messages from BGE beyond the end of the project. And of course, take advantage of the default legacy sites within European Commission, such as Cordis for easier project code, and then it will take you out to the particular results from there to those same archives, for example, on ENA. And final slide. Thanks. This was just a little graph, José, to just to emphasize that the communication ends with the project and dissemination will continue afterwards. And obviously, most of the exploitation is afterwards. And this is really to emphasize that that's why we need to think about legacy right from the very start. And we are quite lucky, at least in the genomics community, for having a number of platforms already established to ensure that in terms of data. It's ensuring that in terms of messaging, which was our biggest challenge. Hopefully we didn't overrun too much, Luísa. That's it from me and José.
Thank you. Really great presentations. I think we have a lot of things to discuss. Not that much time, but it's fine. Because also in the chat, there's been quite some discussion. So I will bring one question here, because I think that's an important one, from Dragan. What are the best measures to maintain or increase motivation of stakeholders to participate in the project? Any general thoughts?
I have started to answer, so maybe I can share my experience and then not finish my answer there. So first, we talk with them about concrete activities that they just have to imply in during their work. Second, so be as concrete as possible. Second, help them. They will ask you. They will have. I don't think that's my experience. So even if we are dealing with some concrete project, they will maybe ask on something else. That's their problem. Help them also with that way the confidence is being built. Thirdly, organize something maybe special, not always just workshops, but some celebrations of some good projects or something like that. And the final thing, when you're organizing some workshops or something, bring lunch, bring something to drink or something like that. And that always make them feel comfortable and welcome. So that's from my experience. José has something to say.
Yeah, probably from a higher perspective, because as I said before, BGE is a EU-wide project. So I mean, we don't really get to talk to a lot of people in person. We normally let's send them stuff, right? But one of the things that I believe helps also is when you work on your key messages, you have your key message, biodiversity, genomics is important for this and this and this and that. And then you have your stakeholder audience, your target audience. I'm going to send this message to these people. It's very important in my experience to think about what we call the drivers of that stakeholder group. What is it that they want? Is it a return of this of the investment, if they are like the people in Brussels, let's say? Is it some societal change that they need? Let's say that we're talking to some policy-related body in a little municipality, and they have this river, and the river is completely polluted. Okay, how your thing is going to benefit them, normally in the short term, I would say. So that kind of thinking of what is it that they need, and the necessary adaptation of your messages to have that in mind, I think it's absolutely crucial in my experience, obviously. And then everything that Ivana said, of course, as well. You have there are a number of practices that you have to follow, of course. But in my particular experience, this is very important. The understanding what is it that they need, and how you can actually address that.
Then I have a question about what you just said, José, because you said, yeah, you need to understand what they need. So how do you know what they need? I mean, how would you approach that? Would you organize meetings, or I don't know, informal workshop where you actually get from them? Because I don't think that once you embark yourself in a project, you actually know what all your stakeholders want, especially if you talk to policymaker, local communities, I don't know, people working in the industrial sector. All of them have different needs and wishes, right? So how do you understand that? Because that's fundamental, right? Otherwise you can't do much.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a previous research they have to do. I mean, in the case of policy-related people, policy-related people normally want, as I said before, a return of the money that they spend. They want to see results, right? So you have to really focus on what kind of results you're going to be delivering, right? If it is about the scientific community, it depends on what sector, what area of the scientific community you may want to actually emphasize their particular research interests. Also, participation is very important. A lot of people want to be consulted about things, but they want to actually see how their contribution has been used, let's say, right? So there is a little bit of experience, of course. There's a little bit of research as well, and and try and error, obviously, So I would say a mixture of those things.
We also have another message in the chat. I guess that maybe can be to anyone, actually. So were any of you ever told that your project is not big enough in terms of money received to be highlighted, for example, in the media? Maybe I guess this might go maybe more to Jean-Baptiste. Maybe he had more experience, I think, with the media than.
Well, I guess in my case, I'm talking about corals and climate change. So people are just like, boom. And we also have beautiful pictures and videos and things. So it's quite easy to attract the journalist here. That's a good point of this project, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that. Also, Ivana mentioned her work in this place that is super touristic, right? Beautiful park in Croatia. I guess it attracts a lot of attention. And then we go back to the discussion of yesterday, working with peculiar organisms or sea plants. We were talking algae and things like that is much more challenging also in this aspect of receiving attention and funding and so on. So that's also something in BGE that we see a lot, because right now we are promoting the case studies. José can talk more about this, but there is always this gap between what is charismatic, what is seen by the media, and what isn't. So yeah. José?
There's one thing also that I believe has come to me through experience, obviously, is that journalists in general only think about results. They don't think about the process. They don't think about the work that is behind, they just care about, okay, is it going to fix the river or not, basically, right? So that's an important thing. I mean, we have to acknowledge at some point that many of the things that we do are simply not that attractive, I would say, for the general public, I mean, and for making them attractive for the general public, sometimes journalists make the mistake that you just pointed out before, Jean-Baptiste. They have to say, yeah, we will save the Mediterranean, because otherwise they don't sell newspapers, let's say, right? So it's an exercise, as I said, of managing expectations. I mean, you want to communicate the things that you want to communicate because you think and you believe that they are relevant. Of course, but you have to admit that people don't know that much about this, and they're used to like big headlines and stuff like that. So it's an exercise also in humility, I would say, and say, okay, this is something I can actually communicate because this is something that's worth a press release, and I believe that there is an audience for this. If there is not such a case, I would say don't even make the effort, honestly. I mean, do an effort, obviously in researching and publishing if you can, in a journal, etc. But for the general media, and then what do you get from the general media anyway? Visibility, right? Basically. But, other than that, not much, honestly, I would say.
But then I don't know, maybe if we have still a few minutes, but I mean, this is really a fascinating discussion, because I also, just what also you just said, José, and also what Jean-Baptiste asked at the end of his slide, like, because I understand the media side of having super captivating, titles because they need to sell. But I also wonder if this kind of interaction can also be detrimental to science in the long term, because you do really describe also, very often scientists as indeed the people that are gonna save species or save ecosystem. And then, I mean, this is not a process that you just solve with a project, right? It takes time, it takes efforts, it takes involvement of many people. So you kind of like almost raise the expectations super high on the scientist side, and then if they don't meet that expectation, then it's science is not able to answer the most pressing questions of this world, for example, which we know is not just about science alone, right? So I wonder, I do see that point, but I also, indeed, as also Jean-Baptiste said, are also this kind of interaction maybe in the long term going to be detrimental to science as a whole, right? That it has more expectation than what we can actually answer, kind of. Will?
Thank you, Chiara, for saying exactly my point.
That's what you were right. Fantastic.
I was not clear, and thank you. You clarified everything.
Awesome. Will?
I'd say it's, maybe that don't think in benefits. To be pessimistic, you can say it's the lesser of two evils. If we restrict communications with the media too much, we got the worst case scenario, which is scientists are perceived in glass towers, and then that's like game over. We lost the mission, so we just have to risk it. And there was some nice comments earlier on about one of the best ways, if we can, as scientists, to alleviate this is to develop relationships with journalists. At least then a couple of messages will get out in the right format. Hopefully they use the right title. And even better, when they write the article in the mainstream media, they might even refer to the science paper it came from, which frequently doesn't happen either.
Maybe, I don't, I guess we need to end it here. I wanted to hear José's perspective since he's a journalist, so on this.
José, you have any final?
The thing is that, I mean, after some time, I get disappointed sometimes when I see the headlines, you know, that once again, we are almost this close to finding the cure for this cancer or for these things, you know. So repeated efforts, you know, and trying to make it big, everything we did, the media has that detrimental effect, I would say. Yeah, I don't think anybody believes it anymore. Whenever we say, wow, this is the new discovery. Yeah, well, it's something probably, you know, but it's not that big probably, right? Yeah, that's mostly my experience.
Okay. I think now it's a good time that we go to the break. I'm really happy. I think we managed to create discussion here. And as a final message, like Rob said yesterday, I remind you that we have a media committee in URGA. So if you're interested in discussing this, exactly this, it has been a really small committee, but if you like this sort of discussions, and of course with a focus in genomes, you're more than welcome. It's open. All the committees are open. And if you want to join, just send us an email. I shared the address there. And yeah, we do the social media for URGA, the website, and we are always looking for ways to improve it. So yeah, you can join if that sounds interesting. Thank you again to everyone.
I would say also, Luísa, that we also have the Citizen Science Committee that is more involved on the stakeholder side. So if you're also interested on that topic specifically, you can also join the URGA Citizen Science Committee.
Yeah, good. I wanted to say that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone. So we will be back in 9 minutes at 10:15 for the next session on gap analysis, stakeholder engagement, and public engagement as well in genomic applications. So see you soon.